let's talk about the nature now. I think we both agree that we lost the contact of the nature, with the nature. I live here surrounded with nature, and I do this contact a lot, and I really think that it transformed myself, because I was a severely obese guy, and after a lot of lifestyle things and diet things in the way that you mentioned in the book, now I'm like 70 pounds less, and with another lifestyle. And I think we have to bring this to our kids. But most people in the big cities, even here in Brazil, like São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, didn't have a lot of time to play in the parks or sit in the grass and in the backyards. They don't have even backyards because they live in apartments. But how can you suggest them to begin this contact of the nature? When we have a little baby, when you think, I used to tell my patients to put the baby in a little protected area in the ground from 3 months. Then 3 months old. So how do you think about this? How we can manage this need of contact?
Well, you know, I think for one thing, people feel like they don't have time or they don't live in a place where there's nature, but I live in New York City. And, you know, when I first started my practice, I decided, my own practice, I decided I wanted to have a little bit of garden. And I ended up finding an office that had an abandoned lot behind it. And it was really not nice looking. And I ended up really working with someone to build soil, make rich soil. We ended up growing things there. When you first saw it, it was horrible. It was covered in vines. There were no earthworms. It was not a nice environment, and we made it into a beautiful environment. And that was right in New York City. So I feel like it's just about how motivated you are. Every city, pretty much every city has some green space. And you use that green space. There's a reason it exists. It's because it makes us happier and healthier. Otherwise, they wouldn't keep it, okay? It's a reason. It's because it helps us stay sane in the best way possible. So, you know, if you live in the city, you go to the park. When you have a little baby, you take walks in the park. The baby could be in the stroller, could be in a carrier. You don't have to roll around in the mud with your newborn, but you are going to be out, and even you're breathing in these microbes, you're getting exposure from the leaves, the trees, the sun. All these things are interacting. The terrains are mixing, okay? And this is valuable in ways we don't even fully understand. We know it's valuable. There's a lot of data that supports it, but I'm sure it's much more than we even know now. And for adults and children who are older, to go walking in the forest. So, okay, you're not going to live in the forest maybe, but maybe you're going to go on the weekend, you know, when you have a day off. In our family, my family has been dragged to every nature place. We go on road trips on the weekends. I write in the book about going to travel 2 hours to find raw milk. You know, this was not something I did every week. I don't expect that people are going to drive 2 hours every week, but these are the things that you do. I mean, I do that instead of, my kids didn't do, you know, competitive gymnastics or, you know, they weren't doing like little sports when they were babies and little kids, because we wanted to be together as a family and be out in the natural world. And that was a priority. And if we don't make it a priority, especially for people who live in the city or even in the suburbs, it's not going to happen. So you have to really think about it as just as important as going to school, just as important as going to work is going to nature. And it replenishes you, and it makes you more productive, and it makes you feel happier, and it makes you feel more relaxed, and it helps your health. It helps prevent cancer. I mean, these are documented outcomes from being in nature. So, you know, to me, we just, even I'll tell a kid, if you have a book to read for school, go sit outside in the grass, find a rock to sit on, and just enjoy that time of being outside and getting natural light, which actually, you know, we now know that nearsightedness, there's an epidemic of nearsightedness. And I thought for a long time, oh, this is genetic, or it's because we're sitting and staring at screens or reading books. And it turns out those do play a role. But the biggest factor is actually natural light exposure, which means that when we keep kids inside, we are actually affecting their vision. And having them be outside, the authors of one of the studies said 3 hours a day exposed to natural light is critical for having good vision.
And the problem with vitamin D too, because we are even here in Brazil, because everybody thought, oh, you are in Brazil, a sunny country, you are in a tropical area, so don't care about vitamin D. Oh, I see every day. I'm in Northeast near Ecuador, and I have kids every day in my office with a very low vitamin D. So
yes.
I think we have to supplement, but we have to supplement sun to them. I say to them, go to the sun. We are avoiding sun because of all this hype of skin cancer and a lot of other things, but I think you have to balance. It's just balance.
Well, I always tell people sunburns are dangerous. So, getting a sunburn is a problem, but actually your risk of sunburn and your risk of developing something like melanoma is actually lower with chronic daily sun exposure. So it means you're building up basically slowly a tolerance versus going out, every once in a while, spending a lot of time in the sun and then truly burning, which is dangerous. And I think we have good data to say that. So what I say is during the hottest hours of the day, if you're someone who burns, then keep yourself covered, a little more covered, or go be in a shadier place, or, go be in the woods during that time. But in the maybe slightly cooler times when the sun is not as strong, we need to be exposed to the sun. And actually, the Karolinska Institute released this amazing study where they actually said afterwards that, and this was, I think, with over 30,000 women, that they had twice the risk of dying when they assiduously avoided sunshine. And what they ultimately said was the risk is similar to smoking. Avoiding the sun is like you're just a smoker to your health.
I saw it. It was amazing. In this problem of vitamin D, I think low vitamin D is more a marker of a problem.
Yes.
Yes, it's a marker that you are inflamed, that you are not getting enough sun, that you are not connected with nature or good food.
Right.
So, even given supplements, if you don't change your lifestyle, it won't. It won't heal.
That's right.
So in this area, you are a pediatric neurologist, and we are very worried about this rise in autism and mental problems in the kids, and depression and the ADHD. And we now know that you have this connection of gut, brain, and immune system. So in your practice, do you recommend any particular diet, supplements, probiotics, herbal products for the allergic children with immune dysfunction or mental disorders? Do you think you have some kind of food that is indispensable?
Well, definitely it's very individual per child. I will say, but first I'll say, as far as, emotional issues, cognitive issues, autism, ADHD, even behavior issues, I have seen many, many children who looked like nothing would help them, who had actually failed medication, antidepressants, mood stabilizers, the strongest psychiatric medications you can imagine, where we changed their food, and we addressed their microbiome and their immune systems, and we saw dramatic changes where they didn't need medication. Maybe they used botanicals, maybe we used some supplements, but we didn't necessarily need any pharmaceuticals. And these were kids who were different children. Their parents said, they are different children. One case is a little boy that came to me with autism, high functioning autism, and he was so aggressive and the parents were so frustrated. The only thing I did for this little boy the first time, I mean, we cleaned up his diet a little bit because he was eating certain processed foods, and that can make a huge difference as well, is taking out food dyes, preservatives, and, you know, MSG and all these kinds of artificial additives and sweeteners. But in this little boy, I took him off of dairy because he had a story where he had asthma, he had eczema, he had this behavior. He had had a lot of colic as a baby when he was getting the bottle. It's a very classic story for milk reactivity or sensitivity. And we took him off dairy for 1 month. And his teachers started asking, was he put on a stimulant? Because his behavior was so drastically different. He focused so much better. He wasn't having outbursts. The parents said, now we can go places, we can do things with him. And the way we knew it was really dairy was because they sort of started to, they called me a few months later and said, oh, you know, things are terrible again. We don't know why. We're doing all the same things. I said, tell me exactly what he's eating. Well, it turned out that they said, oh, well, he's doing so well. He could have a little bit of dairy here. He could have a little bit of dairy there. And I said, do me a favor. Just be strict. Stop it 100% for another 2 weeks. Tell me if you notice a change. They called me within 5 days and said, we have our son back again. We stopped it, and I can't believe how sensitive he is. So sometimes removing one food, basically one food, is the difference between having a child who's doing fantastically well and a child who is absolutely falling apart. Some of the things that I think are standard are things like omega-3s, like a fish oil or cod liver oil. I think that can be really, I don't think a ton. I think just a little bit is okay, you know? So 1 teaspoon a day is as much as I usually would ever give. A probiotic or eating fermented foods. And I am a big fan as a neurologist of a B complex. So if I'm giving one real like vitamin, it would be a B complex most of the time, because it's so important for the brain in so many ways. It's so important for the immune system. It's so important for detoxification. It's important for mitochondria function, right? These energy makers of the cell. So all of these things, I think a B complex is very important. You find a good quality one, and you know, I stick with that. The other supplement I love, love, love is magnesium. Many children are deficient. If you have a child with anxiety, a child with headaches, a child with tics, a child with seizures, a child with ADHD, a child with sleeping problems, magnesium is going to be helpful. It might not be the magic pill, sometimes yes, sometimes no, but it is going to be helpful in all of those people. So magnesium, anywhere from 100 to 400 milligrams, or Epsom salt baths we will do also, where they absorb it through the skin. I love that. And botanicals and herbs, I mean, I use so many different kinds with children, and they respond so beautifully. You know, but for children who are allergic, we talked about medicinal mushrooms. As long as they're not allergic to mushrooms, I do like to use mushrooms like reishi, maitake, shiitake. Even if I just put it in a soup, I love bone broths or mushroom broths, or both, because it's like really dense nutrition and minerals coming into the child. So I also think if instead of using processed sweeteners, I don't say no sweeteners at all, but if you're doing sweeteners, natural. So for me, I would use raw honey. I would use, if it's over a child over a year of age. Maple syrup is something that we have here. I know it's not always exactly the same with you and the kind of plants that you have, but we have that as a local food. Date sugar is another thing we might use. Molasses, blackstrap molasses. So these are, using natural sugars actually means that you're getting antioxidants and phytonutrients. Honey is actually being looked at as a way to treat diabetes, as opposed to regular sugar.
How about stevia?
You know, so stevia is an herb which is sweet, and I've grown the plant in my own garden, and I've used it. It's 300 times sweeter than sugar, and it's also doesn't taste exactly the same. So you have to use it in very particular ways, but I think it can be beneficial, and it's really nice for like iced tea or something if you want to sweeten your drinks. The processed stevia forms, I'm not so sure about, to be honest with you. You know, there's always companies that are trying to kind of benefit from how they can use it and process it in a way that's no longer healthy. So I think stevia's great when it's still close to the natural form.
So we see a lot of reports of kids getting better of these bad behaviors in autism, ADHD, and other problems with ketogenic diets, diets that are higher in fat. Do you have an experience? I think, do we have to put this diet so high, or can we just take first the processed part of the diet, and when it didn't go well, think about ketogenic? How do you think about it?
Well, so I do think that the ketogenic diet has value. I tend to rarely use ketogenic. Much more commonly, I would use modified Atkins diet, which is not quite as aggressive and restrictive. I started out learning about it in children who have seizures and adults who have seizures. So it's actually modified Atkins diet is effective for most of those epilepsy patients. Very rarely do you actually need to go so far as the ketogenic diet. And the ketogenic diet also has more risk. You know, it's more difficult, certainly. And there's a little bit more likelihood of, you know, more significant side effects, kidney stones or other things like that. But modified Atkins, I would always go to as my first, and I've seen very dramatic changes. Certainly in seizures, we know, and we've looked at it now in autism, and it's we have studies. There are good studies that show the improvement of autism symptoms and behaviors. So I think part of it is actually that we do need a lot of fat to have a healthy developing brain and a healthy immune system. The other piece is that a lot of times the processed sugars and flours and grains are actually feeding the wrong microbes and also boosting insulin in ways that makes it very inflammatory. Insulin is an inflammatory hormone. And so when we modulate or kind of balance insulin release or reduce it, sometimes the inflammation reduces, and then we see so many better behaviors, and cognition is better, sleep is better, all kinds of things.
Yes, I agree a lot. And imagine people don't know that when you take some high fructose corn syrup product, you have the bad effects of high insulin plus the effect of fructose, excess fructose in the liver. So we are giving a bomb to your children. So we have to think a lot about this. And as a pediatrician, I think we are very responsible to give this message to our patients.
Yeah. Yeah.
So after the book was published, it was it's a huge success in the United States. As I look at that internet and everybody's talking, a lot of interviews like that. But do you think you are seeing this change of mind of people around you, of colleagues? You are thinking this different view of healthy diet, breastfeeding, gut health. This message is getting stronger?
I think so. You know, I think there's still a lot of resistance in the medical community on the one hand, but every time, let's say I post about something that I'm doing with a patient on a medical group on, let's say, Facebook, I'll get some resistance, and then I'll get 3 or 4 personal messages from doctors saying,
Inbox.
with my child, I'm so interested in what you're saying. I'm going to go out and read your book. You know, I really wish someone had taught me these kinds of things in medical school. I wish I wasn't just starting from scratch now. You know, so many people, even doctors, are desperate right now to help their children. And I think, you know, there are answers, and they're clear answers. And, you know, part of the problem is that we need to just, you know, sometimes the answer is right in front of us and we just don't see it. So, you know, I think that, I think people are getting excited. I think doctors are starting to understand that we don't have all the answers in genetics and in pharmaceuticals, you know, which is where so much of our attention is focused, but that epigenetics and lifestyle and food and nutrition are actually what's coming. And I think here at least, and I think this is around the world, the families want this. Families do not, most of the people say, oh, don't you find people are upset that you're not giving them a pill? Don't you think people would just prefer to have a drug? I said, I don't know how it is with adults, but I find that people, when it comes to their children, when it comes to their families, they want nutrition, they want lifestyle. They would prefer to give their child botanicals than they ever would prefer to give them a pharmaceutical. That is absolutely the last resort. So when doctors are able to get up to speed and really offer patients what they want, I think we're going to all be much happier.
So I'd like to say to you that I really hope that your book come here in Brazil. I have it in English, but I really hope it be translated and publicized here. I think I'm the first person of Brazil that is reaching you. Which makes me a lot of very happy. And if your book came here, it will be part of my prescription. So I say to them, buy the Dirt Cure, read it. It will be a prescription book, okay? Wonderful. So really, I really would like to thank you. I hope it will not. It's not our only talk. Maybe some. Later we talk again and
absolutely
maybe announcing the book here in Brazil, okay? And if you want to say final words.
You know, the one thing that I really always try to communicate to parents in particular is, you know, parents know their children and they know how they want to parent their children, and they have wonderful intuition. And for me, healing children is a team work. It's an exercise in parents bringing their expertise and their intuition about their child, and me bringing my expertise in lots and lots of children and treatments. So what I would say to parents is just always listen to your intuition and know that you are going to be making the right choices for your child.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Maya, and hope we see you again soon, okay?
Thank you.